Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Sin and Tonic. Today's story is that of Samuel Little. This case is anything but little. It's a crazy, let's go. Sin and Tonic! Oh, that gin has hit the spot. I've been out in the sunshine all day and it's starting to feel really summery and lush. This case surprised me because I thought I would have definitely heard of this dude. As I was researching, I was like, what? And maybe some of you, maybe a lot of you are in America, and maybe it's just like, oh yeah, this guy. But I didn't know, and from what I could find, it doesn't seem like he's that much of a big deal, considering. We'll go into it. Oh, the eye. So if you have heard of Samuel Little, I want to say Stuart Little every single time. I'm definitely probably going to call him Stuart Little. He is anything but a cute mouse. Definitely. But apologies if I do slip in and call him Stuart Little, because he's not. I'll just call him Little. Okay. Little was born on the 7th of June in 1940 in Georgia. As is often the case with serial killers, Little did not have an easy ride as a child. His mum was a prostitute, a teenage prostitute, and he ended up growing up being raised by his grandmother in Ohio. And it just didn't go very well. He didn't have a good time at school and he got into trouble from a really early age. At the age of 13, he stole a bike, and this meant that he got sent to like a reform school. I think in my case last week, the kid went to one of these. Hello. So a school for naughty kids, and I guess reform, that means, to reform them, but it rarely happens. If anything, in Little's case, when he went to places like this, reform schools, later on prison, he often came out worse. Little would say, this is worrying, that as a young child, kindergarten, so what's that like? Is that reception here? So the first year of school, primary school, this is when his fascination with strangulation began. He would claim, he said a number of stories actually, but one of the ones that comes up the most is that he had a teacher in kindergarten and like she would touch her neck. It makes me feel weird doing it. Now I feel grim. But this, and like her touching her neck or whatever, it made him, he had a fascination with strangulation. There's no other way to say it. And it rhymes a bit. As a teenager, he collected true crime magazines, not judging. And again, this fascination with strangulation, I've got to stop saying that, but his fascination with that and this area of women, he would look for stories in these magazines about strangulation and murders using that method. He struggled at school, he continued to struggle at school, and he dropped out of high school. At 16, he was then sent for his first sort of stint in prison, but this was juvie. And he was sentenced to 4 years. So he went in at 16 and he didn't come out till he was 21. And they are really formative years, 16 to 21. And he spent those in juvie. When Little was released from juvie at 21, he headed to Florida and he became a drifter. His life of crime just became, he liked variation in his crime, 100%. My neighbour is playing the trumpet. Oh, they've just stopped. They've had a little... Oh, can you hear me? How cute. I'm going to carry on, otherwise I'll just sit there all day listening to that. So, because it's the Easter holidays here, I am filming in the afternoon. Normally I film in the evening, but I'm having a cheeky gin in the afternoon, and after I've finished I'm going to sit out in the garden, let the kids have a play, and drink more gin. Lush. Anyway, I digress. What was I saying? Stuart Little. Oh shit, see, I did it. He's called Samuel Little. Little was Oh yes, varied. So he was arrested for a number of varying crimes, ranging from shoplifting all the way up to armed robbery, rape, just, and anything in between. It would seem like a favourite for Little was shoplifting and then selling the goods out of his car. Eventually, he's arrested for the robbery of a furniture store, and this leads to him being convicted and having his first sentence in adult prison, because he was in juvie before. So this is his first stint in real prison. While he was in prison, real prison, he takes up boxing and drawing, and then he is released in 1964. And in the following 11 years, he is arrested 26 times. Look at the finger. Who do I think I am? So in these 26 years, he's in and out of prison for offences. One of these offences is robbing a gas station, and he is in prison in 1971, so he's been arrested for this robbery. This is a robbery that he committed with his then girlfriend, Lucy, and his girlfriend, Lucy, was put into a cell with somebody called Jean Dorsey. And Lucy, she would chat to Jean about, the robbery and how her lawyers were telling her that she should testify against Little, and she was basically having a good old gas about it all. And Jean Dorsey, she quite liked the look of Samuel Little, so she was a bit sly, and somehow she started to chat with him, and she told him everything. So she gave him all of this intel and said, your girlfriend is going to completely, she's going to say everything that's happened, blah, blah, blah. And she found out all this information, which meant that when it all came to trial, Little got off because his lawyer was pre-warned about what was going to be said at trial. They knew everything. They knew what Lucy was going to say. So they could sort of scheme. And yeah, he got off with it. Whoa. This Jean's just appeared out of nowhere, but she obviously liked him a lot, and they became a couple. A real Bonnie and Clyde affair it was. They were thick as thieves, very much. In the years that followed, Jean was with Little every step of the way. She followed him around from state to state. Like I said, he was a drifter, and he would commit crimes all over. He'd go quite wide-reaching, 19 states, I think he would flounce about. Little would describe Jean, and this is romantic, as a master shoplifter, but no beauty. Nice. Their relationship was kind of odd. She was 30 years older than Little. However, his own mother and grandmother would die a year after he met Jean, 1972 and 1973, and they were his, the women in his life. And then it was almost like Jean became a surrogate mother, and he liked how loyal, from the very beginning. She didn't even know him particularly, and she showed so much loyalty to him when she gave him all this information about his girlfriend at the time. So that really it clinched the deal. Hold on to your hats, guys, because this is where we get to the spicier part of the story. In 1982, Stuart Little, fuck off, Sophie. Just to let you all know, at this point, I have said Stuart Little so many times and then paused, and it will all be edited out. But just to let you know my frustration, because I've said it so many times. Stuart Little, stop it. I said I was going to call him just Little. Brain. Oh, honestly, imagine if I say it now. Composure. In 1982, Little started to become more on the radar for more serious crimes. He was arrested and charged with murder. This was for the murder of 22-year-old Melinda Lepre. For some reason that I could not find, this case does not go to trial, right? We can guess why as we hear more. But then He's extradited to Florida for another murder. It's all going on. This is for the murder of Patricia Ann Mount. She's 26 years old. And guess what? Again, the case does not go to trial. And this is what I just, it feels crazy. Like, he's been arrested for these two murders. But the reason why, and I think this was the same in the first case, I'm just going to assume, tell me if I'm wrong, but with the second case, there weren't enough credible witnesses. Obviously, we're back in the day, so it's not as advanced with DNA and things like that. So I guess you need to have witnesses, and they would be relying on that. They didn't have... I don't know what they had, because this is a frustrating case. Maybe they had more evidence than they said. But these two women were sex workers, and it kind of felt like, oh, they died. Although he was arrested and charged, nothing went any further than that. So he's then a free man, and off he heads to California. And this is beyond. In 1984, on the 26th of September, Laurie Barros is walking towards her friend's apartment. Laurie is a prostitute, and she is then attacked from behind, hit over the head, and dragged into a car. And this turns out to be Little. By some sort of miracle, and it really is a miracle, Laurie did survive, so she was able to tell her story, and she did report this to the police. It did take her a few hours after the event, because she was worried and she was scared too, because she was a prostitute. She didn't feel like she would be taken seriously. So she describes what happens, and she's attacked, dragged into this car. She's then driven to a abandoned lot. So I think, like just an abandoned place in a part of town that is renowned for drug use and not pleasant. Little then, when they arrive, he pulls Laurie into the back seat by her neck, and this is where he starts to try and kiss her. I mean, it gets a lot worse, but Laurie offered to cooperate with Little if he was going to rape her, and because she got scared and she knew something wasn't right straight away, she knew that this wasn't just about rape, and he was choking her, and it was in a very controlled manner. So he would choke her until she nearly passed out, and then he would release his grip and he would ask her to swallow, and he would have his thumb here. So he liked the feeling of her swallowing, and he liked the feeling of restricting her breathing until the last minute, and just before she would pass out, he would ask her to swallow. And this went on, and just how terrifying. And she realised, this isn't about rape or sex, this is about death. He wants to kill me. She pleaded with Little for her life, and he said that she should trust him and that he loved her. Very, very odd and frightening. That's like out of a horror film. He removed her tights, her underwear, her shoes. He then tied her hands behind her back with her tights. And he continued with the strangulation, sexual assault. And then he did this until she eventually did pass out. When she came to, he had taken her out of the car and onto a pile of rubbish. And this is where he then knelt on her chest and then continued to strangle her. She is a miracle. She did survive. He left her for dead. What had happened is that she had passed out, but he thought he had killed her. So he's gone. And then at some point after that event, Laurie would regain consciousness. She played dead for quite a long time because she was really scared. She didn't know how long she'd been unconscious for, and she was really scared that he was still in the vicinity and that, if he saw her, he would come back and, she might not then survive. So she played dead for a long time to make sure that he was really gone. And then she made her way to a phone box to call her friend. Her friend came and collected her. And like I said, it was a few hours later, but her friend convinced her that you need to tell the police, you have to. And she did. So she gave a full report, and she gave a description of Little, his car, where this had all taken place. and she gave as much information as she could. Because of this, the abandoned lot where he had taken Laurie was patrolled quite often by officers because they thought maybe he'll come back, like maybe he'll try this again. So that's what they did. They just patrolled that area quite frequently. Oh God, I feel like I've gone beetroot red. Oh, is it the gin? What's occurring in my body? Oh God, it's worried me. I need something to flap at my face. Hello? Oh. Where's my little fan when I need it? I'm not prepared for spring, summer. Terrible. A month later, Little is back at the lot, and the police see a car matching the description of the car that Laurie has given at this lot. So they go to have a little chit-chat with the owner. They approach the car, and as they do, Little gets out of the car to have a talk with them, and he says, oh, it's just some crap in it, just a lie, bullshit. The officer, one of the officers, shines his torch into the car and finds just the most gruesome sight. And I can't even really, there was a naked woman, so completely naked. She had her like a black bra on her chest, but not on. And her one leg was above a headrest and one leg was on the back seat. And, suggestive of what. And then her top half and her head and neck were sort of crammed down into the what do you call that at the bottom? With the footwell, the one. And yeah, so very awkward, not comfortable position. And she had blood around her nose and her mouth, and she just looked a real state. And she was barely alive. When they sort of went into the car, she was gasping for breath. On the drive into custody, because he was obviously arrested, he said to the officers, quote, "How is the bitch? Is she going to make it?" He's a case, isn't he? Oh. In court, when this went to trial, he would say that he had paid her for sex. She was a prostitute and he had paid her for sex, and that she had not satisfied him. So, that was an excuse for what he had done. Oh, goodness me. And yeah, he was just quite flippant about it. I didn't get what I wanted. She didn't do what she said, so I beat her nearly to death and strangled her. What are you going to do? And they did nothing, because it all ended in a mistrial. I must admit I struggled to get my head around it, because it was a mistrial, but the police were they were the witnesses. Right. Mistrial. I don't really get that. He pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of aggravated assault. Not rape, which he did, and not attempted murder, which it was, but aggravated assault. And this was against Laurie, and the other victim was called Tonya. He would receive a prison sentence of 4 years for his aggravated assault, and he would only serve 2 of those 4 years. Now, he would go straight out of prison to carry on his life of crime, because why the hell not? Whatever you're doing for this man is nothing more than a slap on the wrist to him at this point. And now he's committed even more serious crimes than in his previous many, many years of horrificness. And you've given him just exactly the same sentence. He probably got more of a sentence for less. So why on earth would he come out and think anything of just jumping straight back into his old ways? Prison is not working here for Mr. Little, is it? Why would he ever stop? I'm so rosy, I'm going to just place this on my cheek. I feel like I'm the colour of a beetroot. If I am, I am. Do I match my gin? Maybe that's what it is. Oh, it's like, Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. When she eats a blueberry, I've turned into my gin. Oh, that was nice. Now I'm rosy and dewy. In 1988, Jean, his ride or die, she would sadly pass away from a brain aneurysm, and Little would go on for another 2 decades after her death with his life of crime. He spent most of that in and out of prison, serving small sentences for varying crimes. He was arrested more than 50 times in over 24 states. that's just his life, isn't it? It's like it was his lifestyle. Needless to say, he had a 100-page rap sheet. 100 pages. And in 56 years of his criminal life, he only ever spent 10 years of that in prison for his crimes. So out of 56 years, just the 1 decade of that in prison. And he was just so terrible. We haven't even got to the, we're not even there yet. It wasn't until Little was an old man, 72 years old, and he was in a homeless shelter, and he was arrested, 72. He was diabetic, he wasn't in a good way, he had heart problems, he was diabetic, I think he was in a wheelchair, and there was a warrant for his arrest for drugs charges, of all things. You know, he did everything, so why not? He was extradited to California. That's where these drug charges were against him. And they took, at this point, a DNA sample. Oh, it started off a whole world of madness. This DNA sample would link him to 3 murders. 1 in 1987 and 2 in 1989. Good old DNA. The first murder took place on the 13th of July in 1987. The body of 41-year-old Linda Alford was found in Los Angeles in an alleyway. She was naked from the waist down, and the autopsy showed that she had died from manual strangulation. She had cocaine in her system, and there was semen on her shirt, and that was the sample that they took from her back then, and that is what was linked to Little years later. On the 14th of August in 1989, the body of 35-year-old Audrey Nelson was found in a parking lot behind a nightclub. Again, naked from the waist down, cocaine in her system, and again the autopsy showed manual strangulation. In 27 years, the medical examiner had never seen so much force used in a strangulation. There were crush injuries to her chest. Do you remember Little had knelt on Laurie? We know that because she survived. Seems like that was his MO, to kneel on the chest. And so much so that he had crushed her spine. There were parts of her spine that were crumbled. She had fought back and there was blood underneath her fingernails, and that was the sample that then linked back to Little. On the 3rd of September in 1989, another body was discovered. This was 46-year-old Guadalupe Adipaca. Apologies if I've got that incorrect. I think I've done that okay. Manual strangulation again, bruising, heavy bruising on her chest, sexual assault, cocaine in her system, and again semen on her shirt. Now, all 3 of these murders are all very, very similar. So it's like, why aren't they linked? They're all in the same area. They're all like, you know, the whole naked from the waist, just everything's the same. The medical examiner did say, I think all of these murders are linked. I'm going to have to open this door. I'm so hot. Now you'll probably hear like birds and planes and trumpets. In 2014, Little would go on trial for these 3 murders, and they had heavy DNA evidence, and they also had witnesses. They also called on surviving victims to take the stand. So Laurie would testify, and also somebody called Hilda. She was a sex worker, and she was approached by Little in a nightclub in 1980. They arranged a price of like $50 for him and her to go back to her apartment, and, you know. As soon as they step inside her apartment, Little punched her in the back of the head and proceeded to choke her, and she loses consciousness. All the while that this is happening, he's punching her in the face. So when she comes to, she's on her bed and he's still hitting her in the face and choking her so that she nearly passes out, that thing. She passes out again, and the next time she wakes up, she's in a bath that's filled with water, and she's got a neck tie or a tie round her neck, and he pushes her under and then uses the tie to pull her back up. It's just absolutely torturous. He's just torturing this woman. It really is like something that you would expect to see in a horror film, and it's actually real, isn't it, grim? Even worse, while he is drowning her and pulling her up, when he pulls her up, he punches her in the face. I just can't imagine the pain. Don't forget when he had his first stint in prison, he took up boxing. He's like, you know, it's going to hurt. The next time she wakes up, she's in hospital, where she spent 3 days there being treated for her injuries. She did not want to admit that she was a prostitute. There was a lot of shame in what they were doing for money, so she just didn't want to say. So she told the officers that it was a home invasion. Crikey, they must have been like, what the hell are we dealing with here? Because it wasn't the truth. So they just thought, gosh, someone's broken into this person's house and done this. They didn't know the real story. Not that it's not as bad, but, you know, they were then on the lookout and probably on high alert for somebody that's breaking into properties when that was not the case. There was another survivor, Leila McLean, and she was attacked in 1981. He picked her up on the street and they were going to go to the Shamrock Hotel, you know, for that. And why can't I say it? It's like you can't say anything for that. And as they were driving around to go to the Shamrock, he drove past it. And that's when she was like, oh, no. So she, you know, she was like, can you take me back then? Because, you know, this is not right. She knew something wasn't right. Again, she said he punched her on the back of the head and then again at the front of the head. Just like, it seems this is his MO. Basically, all of his victims so far have said that they were pretty much rendered unconscious with a first time big punch or a couple of punches. So he really sort of takes them by surprise and just renders them unconscious. He pulled over and he continued to punch her, and then he started to choke her. Leila was feisty and she got out of the car a number of times. She managed to get free from him a few times, and every time he would get her back and pull her back into the car and continue to punch her and choke her. At one point, a young lad went past on a bike and he actually stopped, even though this is horrific and that's quite scary. He stopped and asked Leila if she wanted help, but she was being strangled and she couldn't talk. And Little then spoke for her and said, she's my wife and she's drunk and we're just, go away, I'm dealing with it. But what a grim thing to see. She eventually did escape from Little. She got away and she ran with nothing on her bottom half, so completely naked from the waist down. And that's how scared she was, that she just ran, and she ran into traffic and just ran into the traffic. So, that petrified. She thought she was going to be killed. So she did that and somebody stopped and they took her to hospital. And again, she was a sex worker, she was a prostitute, and so she didn't tell police at first what had actually happened. She didn't feel like she could. On the 25th of September in 2014, finally, Little was found guilty. It took unfricking deniable evidence to get to this point, even though, in other cases there were, by the way, in all of these other cases, there were witnesses. There were witnesses to what had happened. He wasn't clever in one way, I suppose, because what he did, and this just gets me cross, and he even talks about it, he's so brazen about it, but he just picked victims that wouldn't be missed. That's what he thought, wouldn't be missed. So always very vulnerable women, sex workers, homeless, drug addicts. It was it's awful to say it, but he just had, he could have his pick. He was given 3 life sentences that had to be, and he was very ill and old. So at 72 years old, he was taken out of his homeless shelter and put into prison. Now, we are quite a ways into this video, chaps, aren't we? And we are just about to get spicy. In 2018, Little agrees to be interviewed by a Texas Park Ranger, James Holland. Ooh, James Holland. This was in exchange for a transfer out of whatever prison he was in, which I've forgotten, I'll check in a sec, to another prison. So obviously he wasn't happy where he was, he wanted something else. Probably wanted a flat screen TV as well. So this was all set up and arranged, and these were all filmed interviews. And you can see some parts of them on YouTube as well. Interesting. And a bit, okay. He basically yaks on about the murders, but not just the 3 murders. Oh no. Many, many, many more. Many more murders that he has committed. It's absolutely something else. Between 2018 and 2020, they would have many interviews together that were filmed. Many, many hours. And in a very controlled, calm, reminiscent fashion, Little would speak about the many women that he had murdered in great detail. Not the actual murder itself. It's almost like he wanted to brush over that bit. But he can remember their faces. Do you remember I said he took up drawing in his first stint in prison? Well, he actually drew some of his victims. He can remember their faces. He can remember, it's like he had a photographic memory. He can remember how much they weighed, roughly within reason, how tall they were, what they looked like, what colour their hair was, their eyes, their skin, their shapes, like everything, the way they sounded. You know, he could remember one victim, like he said she had buck teeth. He could remember all these details. He could also remember all of the details of the night that they met, or, you know, and where he was and what they did leading up to, obviously, their murder. And then kind of, you know, that happened. And then he would talk about after and where he would place their bodies. And yeah, he could remember an awful lot when you consider that he did this so many times. He confessed to 93 murders. 93. And the FBI have verified 60 of those, or around 60. So there's still 26, is that right? Or 36? Oh my God, Sophie Math, 36? There's still about 36 women that have not been identified, and these are the portraits that he's drawn. And I'll share a picture of it, and it's sad. I'm just going to read out a quote about him talking about picking out his victims. I'd go back to the same city sometimes and pluck me another grape. How many grapes you all got on the vine here? He said. He said he would avoid people who would be immediately missed. And he said, for example, I'm not going to go over there into the white neighbourhood and pick out a little teenage girl. And he was very aware that vulnerable women, so homeless, like I said, sex workers, but especially black sex workers or homeless women, were not missed. He knew that, and that's just so sad, isn't it? That you know, he preyed on them because he knew that not a lot would be done about it, and he was right. He was right, because not a lot was ever done in the time when it was happening. Even, like, you know, those 3 murders that he did get sent to prison for, the medical examiner knew that they were all probably linked. Why weren't they looking for a serial killer? I tell you why, because they were all vulnerable, like, you know, sex workers. What are you going to do? That's why. If they had all been white college students, for example, that would have been a very, very different story. But no. And he knew that. And that is why he got away with 93 murders. Mother of Mary. In these interviews, he confessed to sometimes having sex with the bodies afterwards when they were dead. Lovely. And he would discuss, you know, his MO, so slow suffocation, and also like his fascination with the neck, and mine is probably like beetroot red, the neck and strangulation. He killed all but 2 of his victims in that way. I think 2 of his victims, might have been 1, were drowned. And it's wildly frustrating the way he speaks about it. It's like he was on dates with these women. He makes it sound like he owns them in some way, and that he loved them and they were on a date that had gone wrong. No, you weren't. What a fantasy. Like, no, that's not what happened. But that is how he sees it, and it's like he owns them. Just the way he spoke about it was just not true. Not true at all. He wasn't on dates with these women. He abducted these women and terrified these women. He didn't love these women. They weren't on a date. And yeah, it's almost like he explained their death, like they angered him in some way or they wronged him in some way. Oh, you know, the date went badly. That was the sort of feeling. In all of these interviews and just evidence, it was discovered that he did have a very similar pattern. He would render these women unconscious with a really strong knockout punch to start with. He then obviously had full control over them. He would then sexually assault his victims while they were unconscious or not, and then he would begin the process of this slow and controlled strangulation, and he liked that feeling of the swallowing. All the while, normally punching his victims in the face. So just torture. It's torture. He was torturing them to death. And then, ultimately, usually either just complete strangulation or the crushing, so kneeling on them while strangling them, and that would be how they then passed away. He also believed that once they were dead, they belonged to him, and that when he died, they would all be reunited. I don't know what goes on after you die, but that is not going to work out for you. His murders took place in over 19 different states, and between 1970 and 2005, 35 years. 35 years. The FBI have said he is the most prolific serial killer in the US. And what's annoying about that is that he could have been caught. 100%. If they'd have given a shit. A lot of the time I think it was to like save paperwork, because a lot of the victims had alcohol and cocaine or drugs and alcohol in their system, and the medical people, examiners, were like, oh, it's probably an overdose. Probably a lot of them were put down to accidental overdoses or alcohol poisoning, even with like massive crush injuries to the chest or like huge like punches to the face and stuff like that. Alcohol poisoning, crushed, like, you know, this thing, forget the name, broken and stuff like that. They just ignored all of that because they were sex workers and they had taken drugs. Just what? Absolutely. Or like, you know, found in these awful positions with like naked from the waist down often. So all of these, you know, his MO was always the same, but they often would say, oh, it was drugs or alcohol. One victim was found in a shallow grave, and it was classed as alcohol poisoning. Get that? Dug her own grave, did she? Doubt it. Just trying to cool down a bit. I will get my fan for next time because, well, just so hot. I'm in a t-shirt as well. I have got my slippers on. I feel like I should take them off. Sometimes I get a bit rosy cheeked just drinking gin. Is this what you call a hot mess? Little would share that his first murder was that of 33-year-old Mary Brosley in 1971. Mary was an alcoholic, again, a very vulnerable person, and she'd left her family behind in Massachusetts. She had kids, and she left them with family because people were getting on at her about her drinking. You know, they were trying to help her, but she didn't appreciate that. So she had come away. Little met her in a bar. They were drinking, and then he drove her to a secluded place and he strangled her, and he would say that he experienced a complete lack of control. And I think that for whatever reason, all the stars aligned for Little in that moment. He realised that this was a very vulnerable person, and it all just happened. And I think once that's happened once, it just sparks it, doesn't it, for these people that go on and do these things. And that was the beginning of his 93 victims. Can you believe that? And that's why I can't believe that I'd not heard of him before. I really hope I haven't called him Stuart Little again. I feel like I have. Sorry. I'll find out when I edit. I'll be like, oh, for God's sake. But, yeah, can you see what I mean? Maybe a lot of you are in America, you're going to be like, oh, bloody Stuart Little again. Samuel Little again. But yeah, it just feels, I thought he would be more well known because of his body count. After Little had given 2 years worth of interviews and shared all drawn pictures and the lot, you know, he was sharing, they did not grant his wish, and he was not moved to another prison. Yes, small win, but I was like, oh yeah, great. Why? Why would you? You've got everything you need now. Thank you. And on the 30th of December in 2020, Little died. He died in prison. He had diabetes. He had heart complaints. He was 80 years old, though. He lived a long... Oh, shit. I've knocked my lights out. He lived a long old life. And for the most part, got away with horrific murders. When he died, there was no more scope to find out who these victims were. And they did release his drawings. The drawings were released alongside his description of the victim and when, where he met them, what happened and the such, so that maybe they can be identified if somebody is missing somebody. And I'll share the link actually. So there's these portraits that he drew. He describes exactly what the victim was like, where he went with them. And they did sort of say that he was a bit off because they verified 60 of the victims around that. And in those cases, he was sometimes a bit out with his numbers. So he described the victims perfectly and the event, but he was sometimes out by like 10 years. I mean, 93 victims over 56 years, he's going to get some wrong. But he was out by the when it happened sometimes, and also the location of where the bodies were found, sometimes by quite a bit, but they were all verified nonetheless. So basically you can look online at these portraits and read the descriptions, and I didn't read whether anyone had been identified after that, but yeah, I think it was released in 2021, so it's not been long. And hopefully some families and friends will find closure if they do see their loved one on there. It's really sad, but yeah, probably better to have closure than just not know. I've just checked my notes and it was December 2021, so it really wasn't long ago. America is a big place, so people are going to have to... It would take time for people to even know that that's even out there. I didn't know. It might be on the news over there. But yeah. Oh, actually, so people might have heard more of him now because they've released that. And I'm imagining it's on the news. Spread the word. But yeah. In conclusion to this wickedness, all of that, all of those people, all of those women, I think it really does boil down to, and I really hope it's different now. Oh, I don't know. But it just feels like that I saw a phrase written about it, the gist of it is that if you're a prostitute or a sex worker or homeless, that you're more disposable and not as, not missed. But a lot of the times, these people have children and life has obviously not gone very well for them. And they are the most vulnerable people in our societies other than children. But let's be real, there are homeless prostitutes that are children as well. And it just feels like it's such a vulnerable category of people, because also boys and men as well, and these horrific things are just, they're not safe, are they? They're not safe and they're not protected, and they're very vulnerable. And these predators, because that's what they are, these predators know that. But I would like to think that now the police in the UK, America, that it's a bit more, I don't know, that everybody counts, I would hope, but I'm probably being really naive. And that is all I have for you on today's story. I'm now going to sit in the garden and enjoy the last bit of the sun before it goes down, although it's getting spring summer now, so it goes down later. I feel like I've missed a week, and I haven't. It's because I thought I was going to miss last week and I didn't. And I managed to... Oh, I didn't feel well, did I? Didn't feel well. Now I feel too good. I'm like rosy and I've been drinking gin. So last week I was sweating to death because I had a cold, and today I'm sweating because I don't know. It's warm. It is hot outside. That's the one thing about spring. It just sometimes you get a random day that just takes you by surprise. It either snows, it's just like, oh, it's pleasant, and then it snows or it hailstones, and then you get a day like today where it's like, oh, summer, hello. I'm going to get my fan next week. I'll get my fan next week, and then it will be -2. Anyway, I'm going to love you and leave you, mainly because I'm sweating to death. I can't think of anything that's happened. It's been the Easter holiday, so the kids have been at home. It's been a bit crazy. I'm trying to keep myself afloat, but it feels like I never stop. In the holidays, I just never stop. There's always something. Do you know what? I'm purposefully going to just have a day off tomorrow. Jack it all in. I am. I'm going to have a day off. Yep. And I'm going to enjoy it. And I'm going to eat chocolate. Thank you so much for joining me today for another episode of Sin and Tonic. I do hope you can join me next week for another true crime story and a glass or a vase. Oh, I banged my elbow. Or a mug or a jug or a bug in a hug. Stop. You know, these endings could get, well, oh, it's all dripping down my arm. Drippings with goo. Who knows that one? Drippings with goo. Okay, I'm going to go because it's just gone crazy. Right, I love you, I missed you, and I will speak to you all in the comments, and I will see you all next week. I love you loads. Enjoy the sunshine. Bye.